Your wrinkled old face is becoming an embarrassment to this family, my daughter-in-law declared at the Christmas table, her voice sharp enough to slice through the room's cheer. My son, David, didn't hesitate. He nodded in approval. At last, he muttered, someone finally said it. I rose slowly, folding my napkin with the calm composure I'd carried through 67 years of life. Well then, I said evenly, I suppose I should leave. That was the exact moment David's phone began to ring. On speaker, his boss's voice echoed across the stunned dining room. David, did you realize your mother is on the cover of Forbes? But let me rewind and explain how we reached that moment. Christmas had always been my season of joy. Even after Harold passed away 3 years ago, I threw myself into preparations, just as I had throughout 43 years of marriage and 3 more of widowhood. My legendary sugar cookies, flavored with a mystery ingredient that neighbors begged me to reveal. Prime rib that Harold always swore was better than any steakhouse. Cranberry sauce I fussed over for 2 days until it was just right. This year, I'd invited David and his wife Brittany, hoping against hope things might finally feel different. That maybe, just maybe, Brittany would speak to me without the thin-veiled contempt she'd shown ever since she married my son. After all, I had once raised David alone, 5 years of working 2 jobs while Harold was stationed overseas, 5 years of scraping to keep the lights on and send him to Little League. Surely some part of him remembered. Instead, the moment Brittany walked into my home, she cast her critical eyes around my living room like it was a crime scene. Mom, this house is so dated, she sniffed. When are you going to modernize? I set the holiday meal carefully on my grandmother's china, poured drinks into the crystal glasses Harold had surprised me with for our 20th anniversary. Everything was prepared to perfection. And that was the exact moment Brittany decided to declare that my age, my gray hair, my laugh lines were somehow offensive to her curated Instagram world. Then David's phone call came. And with it, everything began to change. David's expression drained of color as his boss kept talking. Something about a trending video. Something about cookies. Something about Forbes wanting an exclusive. I picked up my purse, my smile polite and measured. Merry Christmas, I said over my shoulder. I'll look forward to your apology when you realize what you've just lost. The irony wasn't lost on me. The very old face Brittany mocked was about to become very marketable. They had no idea. The video that changed everything hadn't even been intentional. My neighbor's 8-year-old granddaughter, Emma, had been visiting when I showed her how to make my cookies. She'd recorded herself helping in the kitchen and accidentally caught me adding my secret, a tiny pinch of lavender from the garden and a drop of homemade vanilla. Grandma Maggie makes the best cookies ever, Emma told her phone. She even grows her own herbs and makes her own vanilla. I chuckled when she asked if she could post it online. Of course, sweetheart. Maybe some other kids will want to learn too. That was 3 weeks ago. By Christmas morning, the video had racked up 2 million views. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. The Food Network wanted to talk about a show. Publisher called about a cookbook. Investors asked about licensing my recipes. And yes, Forbes wanted to feature me in their series on senior entrepreneurs transforming traditional industries. The morning after Christmas, I sat in my kitchen still dressed from the night before, staring at a pile of napkins and business cards filled with hastily scribbled names and numbers. David had called 4 times. I let every call ring to voicemail. Mom, please call me back, his latest message begged. Brittany didn't mean it. There's been a misunderstanding. But there was no misunderstanding. After decades of teaching elementary school, I could read between the lines better than anyone. Brittany had meant every word. And David's agreement, that had been the breaking point. What they didn't know was that I wasn't nearly as powerless as they believed. For 3 years, I'd been carefully investing Harold's life insurance. I owned my house outright. And I'd been nurturing a dream that dated back to when I was 25, before Harold convinced me that teaching was more practical for a woman with kids. Well, Harold was gone. My son was grown. and I was finished being practical. I picked up the phone and returned the Forbes reporter's call. Ms. Rodriguez? This is Margaret Thompson. I'm ready for that interview. The Forbes interview was more than I'd imagined. Maria Rodriguez, a sharp-eyed journalist in her 30s, came to my kitchen with her notepad and recorder. For 2 hours, she listened as I measured flour, rolled dough, and explained what most people forget. There's an entire generation of knowledge disappearing, I told her while sprinkling sugar over the cookies. My grandmother taught me how to make vanilla from scratch, how to grow herbs, how to preserve food without chemicals. These are skills younger people want to learn, but they don't have teachers anymore. Maria leaned forward, intrigued. So, you're thinking bigger than just cookies? Oh, much bigger, I said, sliding a notebook from my drawer. I had been sketching ideas since the TikTok video went viral. What if there was a place where seniors could pass down traditional skills? Cooking, sewing, gardening, woodworking, even old family recipes with the stories behind them? Maria's eyes lit up. Like an intergenerational classroom? Exactly. Think of it as Airbnb meets masterclass, but with grandmothers and grandfathers teaching skills that shouldn't be lost. The response online confirmed what I already felt. In the comments under Emma's video, thousands of young people wrote things like, "My grandma died before teaching me her pierogi recipe. I'd pay anything to learn from someone who knows. I'm 22 and can't even sew on a button. I wish I had a grandmother figure to teach me." The demand was real. The market enormous. I decided to call the project Grandma's Kitchen. Within days, I reached out to Sarah Chen, an old colleague who had left teaching for the tech world. She agreed to build a simple website. I also contacted talented seniors in my neighborhood. Mrs. Patterson, a quilting expert. Mr. Anderson, who had a knack for woodworking. Elena Vasquez, whose Mexican cooking was legendary. They were all eager to join. Meanwhile, David stopped calling and Brittany blocked my number entirely, which honestly felt like a relief. But I didn't have time for resentment. 67, every day mattered. The new Margaret wasn't asking permission anymore. When Sarah sent me a text, "Website prototype is ready. When can you see it?" I untied my apron and smiled. The old me might have hesitated. But this version of me? She was only getting started. Sarah's prototype left me speechless. It was exactly what I'd envisioned, a clean, welcoming website where seniors could create profiles to showcase their skills and younger people could book lessons, either virtually or in person. The beauty of this isn't just the skills, Sarah explained as we sat in her small home office. It's the connection. Look at these testimonials. She pulled up screenshots from TikTok comments. I'd give anything to learn biscuits the way my grandma used to make them. I can't even hem my own pants. Why isn't this taught anywhere? My grandma passed before teaching me her salsa. Please, someone show me. The market research she'd gathered was staggering. 60% of Gen Z reported feeling disconnected from traditional knowledge. At the same time, 75% of seniors felt their skills were undervalued. I said aloud what we were both thinking. We're not just bridging a skills gap. We're solving loneliness, too. Sarah nodded. And the financial model works. Instructors set their own prices and we take a small fee. Your cookie class alone could run $50 for 2 hours. We lined up our first group of instructors. Mrs. Patterson was thrilled about teaching quilting. Elena prepared 3 different Mexican cooking workshops. Even gruff Mr. Anderson warmed to the idea when I pointed out he could charge $75 for teaching someone how to build a bookshelf. But there was more. 3 venture capital firms have already reached out since Forbes announced your upcoming feature, Sarah said one afternoon, her eyes shining. My stomach flipped. Venture capital? Sarah, 3 months ago I was correcting math worksheets. Now we're talking about investors? Margaret, she said with a grin, this could be huge. But you need to be ready. If this takes off, your life is going to change completely. I thought of David and Brittany, how embarrassed they'd been by my old face. 6 months from now, when Grandma's kitchen was everywhere, would they still sneer at me? Actually, I realized I didn't care anymore. Let's do it, I said. Let's change lives. Sarah opened her laptop. Then it's time to prepare your first investor presentation. They want to meet next week. The new life I'd only dreamed of was already knocking at my door. The investor meeting scared me more than the first day I ever stood in front of a classroom 40 years ago. Jennifer Walsh from Crossroads Ventures had requested a formal pitch about Grandma's kitchen. I'd spent an entire week preparing slides with Sarah's help. I wore my best navy suit, the one I'd bought for Harold's funeral but never had the courage to wear again. And I carried my grandmother's leather briefcase, dusted off from the attic. If I was going to present a business built on tradition, I wanted to look the part. Jennifer was younger than my son, no older than 35, with that sharp confidence that comes from making million-dollar decisions before most people have their first cup of coffee. But to my surprise, she listened. Really listened. As I explained the concept, she asked thoughtful questions about scalability, user growth, and social impact. She wasn't dismissive. She seemed genuinely excited. The numbers are strong, she said, reviewing Sarah's projections. Conservative estimates suggest you could reach 50,000 active users in under 2 years. But I'm less interested in the numbers right now. Show me this actually works. That was my cue. I've already been beta testing, I told her, opening my laptop. 15 seniors teaching. 43 students enrolled. I pulled up photos. Mrs. Patterson's quilting class, where her waiting list was already growing. Elena's Salsa Verde workshop that sold out in just 6 hours. Mr. Anderson showing a young father how to build a dollhouse for his daughter. Testimonials poured in, college students learning their grandmother's biscuits, recent grads patching their clothes instead of throwing them away, families cooking together again. This isn't just about teaching recipes, I told her. It's about preserving cultural wisdom, giving seniors purpose, building bridges across generations. Jennifer leaned forward. What do you need from us? I swallowed hard, recalling Sarah's coaching. $200,000 for development, marketing, and first-year operations, in exchange for 20% equity. 3 days later, Jennifer called with an offer, $300,000 for 25%. I accepted. That week, Forbes published the article. Cover photos showed me guiding little Emma's hands as we rolled cookie dough together. The headline read, "The Grandmother Revolution: How One Woman's Cookie Recipe is Changing Education." The same morning, David finally called again. For the first time in weeks, I answered. "Mom," he said, his voice unsteady. I saw the Forbes cover. I had no idea. Why didn't you tell me? I gazed out the kitchen window at my growing herb garden. When would I have told you, David? Between Brittany calling me an embarrassment and you agreeing with her? Silence stretched between us. Finally, he said quietly, "Can we talk in person?" "Of course," I said. "You can book a class through my website like everyone else." David showed up that Saturday looking like a boy caught sneaking in past curfew, uneasy, stiff, clutching a bouquet of overpriced grocery store roses. "These are nice," I said gently, taking them from his hands. "But next time I can show you how to make an arrangement from the garden." Mrs. Patterson's granddaughter just took that workshop and created something far lovelier than this. He followed me into the kitchen, where I had everything set up for his booked class, traditional Sunday pot roast with root vegetables. $45 well spent if you asked me. "Mom," he said awkwardly while washing his hands at the sink, "this feels strange. But I need to say I'm sorry. For Christmas. For what Brittany said. For agreeing with her." I handed him one of Harold's old aprons, the one that read "Kiss the Cook." "Sorry for which part, David?" I asked. "Sorry she insulted me? Or sorry you nodded along?" He hesitated, tying the strings at his waist. "Both. All of it. I didn't realize how dismissive I'd been, how much we'd taken you for granted." "Better late than never," I replied, placing carrots on the counter. "Hand me those." And just like that, we started cooking together, really cooking, for the first time since he was a child, helping me cut cookie shapes. I showed him how to sear meat properly for flavor, how to layer the vegetables so they cooked evenly, how to whisk gravy smooth without lumps. "I thought cooking was just following steps," he admitted, concentrating as he chopped onions. "I didn't know there was so much technique." "Most people don't," I said with a small smile. "That's why this business works. Everyone thinks their grandmother was magical. But really, she just had years of practice and patience. That's the wisdom worth keeping." When the roast was in the oven, we sat at the kitchen table with coffee and the cookies that had started everything. David was quiet for a long time before saying, "Brittany feels awful. She wants to apologize." I took a slow sip. Does she? Or does she just want a share of whatever she thinks my success might bring? He winced. "That's harsh, Mom. Is it wrong?" I asked. He didn't meet my eyes. That was answer enough. "David," I said gently, "I love you. You'll always be my son. But I'm not going backward. I'm not the lonely widow waiting for scraps of your attention anymore. I'm building something meaningful, and I won't stop." My phone buzzed on the counter. Another booking. Someone in California wanted a virtual cookie lesson. "The platform has grown faster than I imagined," I continued. 600 new users this week. 3 production companies want a TV show. Next month, I'm giving a keynote on senior entrepreneurship." David looked at me like he was meeting me for the first time. "Who are you?" he asked, though he smiled as he said it. "I'm your mother," I said with a smile of my own. "I'm just finally acting like it." When he left that afternoon, with leftovers and a different expression in his eyes, I realized something. I wasn't just teaching others how to cook. I was teaching myself to finally value what I'd always known. The embarrassing old woman was gone. In her place stood an entrepreneur, a teacher, a woman who had rediscovered her worth. 3 months after the Forbes article, I learned something new. Success doesn't just attract admirers. It also attracts enemies. I was in Harold's old den, now converted into a proper home office, when Sarah burst through the front door without knocking. Her laptop was clutched against her chest, her face pale. "We've got a problem," she said, breathless. "A big one." She opened her computer on my desk, and my stomach dropped. On the screen was a site called Wisdom Exchange. The layout was practically identical to ours. Same color scheme, same structure, same concept. Their tagline? "Learn traditional skills from experienced seniors." Word for word, it could have been ours. "They launched this morning," Sarah explained, her voice tight. "Peterson Industries is behind it. They've got major funding, and they're offering instructors higher rates than we can afford." I scrolled through their pages and felt my heart sink. Faces I knew, our own instructors, were plastered on their homepage. Mrs. Patterson's quilting class. Elena Salsa Verde. Even the copy read like it had been lifted directly from our site. How is this even legal? I asked, though I already suspected the answer. It isn't illegal to copy a business model, Sarah admitted quietly. And we never patented the design. They're huge, Margaret. They've got resources we can't compete with. That moment, my phone buzzed again. Another instructor canceling their grandma's kitchen sessions. That made 12 in a single week. I stared at the screen, fury simmering under my skin. Through 40 years teaching children, I knew bullying when I saw it. Peterson Industries was trying to bulldoze a grandmother's dream out of existence. They had no idea who they were underestimating. "Sarah," I said, my voice steady now, "do you know why I stayed a teacher all those years instead of moving into administration even though I was qualified?" She shook her head, confused. "Because I preferred working with students instead of politics. But that doesn't mean I never learned how the game is played." I picked up my phone, scrolled through my contacts, and tapped the number I wanted. "Maria? This is Margaret Thompson. I have a story for you about corporate theft, ageism, and a company that thinks grandmothers are easy to crush." The battle for Grandma's kitchen had just begun. The Forbes expose landed like a thunderclap. Maria had done her homework. She interviewed the instructors who'd been lured away, compared the two platforms side by side, and, most damning of all, uncovered Peterson's internal emails. In those messages, Peterson executives casually referred to us as the geriatric competition and discussed strategies for eliminating the grandmother problem. The headline read, "David versus Goliath: How Corporate Giants Target Senior Entrepreneurs." The photo showed me in my kitchen beside a screenshot of Peterson's copycat site. Caption underneath made me prouder than any teaching award I'd ever won. "Some lessons can't be bought. They have to be earned." Peterson's counterattack was immediate and brutal. Within 24 hours, their lawyers filed a barrage of legal challenges, claiming we had stolen their trade secrets. Injunctions, motions, endless paperwork, meant to strangle us in legal fees, not to win in court. "It's harassment," Jennifer Walsh explained during an emergency meeting in my living room. She looked grim but determined. "They know they'll lose. Their tactic is to drain your resources until you fold." I served coffee and cookies. Stress baking had become my latest survival skill, while Jennifer, Sarah, and I talked strategy. But Sarah had another update that made my stomach twist. "David called me directly," she said reluctantly. "He wants to meet. Says he has a solution to the Peterson problem." I nearly dropped my coffee cup. "My son called you? About my business?" Sarah nodded. "He said he wants to discuss a partnership." Something cold settled deep in my chest. That evening, David showed up at my house with Brittany in tow, the first time I'd seen her since Christmas. She carried an expensive bottle of wine and that polished social media smile of hers. "Mom," David began, settling onto my couch as if he owned the place, "Brittany and I have been talking. We want to help." "How thoughtful," I replied, my voice neutral. I noticed Brittany's eyes darting around, calculating the value of every piece of furniture. "David's firm has connections at Peterson," Brittany added brightly. "We could negotiate a partnership. Instead of fighting, why not join them? You'd keep creative control and they'd handle operations. Everyone wins." The room went silent. I set my cup down slowly. A partnership? With the same people trying to destroy everything I've built? "Think about it, Mom," David pressed. "You'd be rich, secure. They have resources you don't." I walked to the window, staring at the herb garden that had sparked this entire journey. Behind me, I heard Brittany whispering urgently to David about closing the deal. And in that moment, I understood. My son wasn't just offering me bad advice. He was working for Peterson Industries. I turned back, my voice low and steady. "Get out." "Mom," I said, "get out of my house. Both of you." Something in my eyes must have told them I wasn't bluffing because they left without another word. The real war had only just begun. The truth about David's betrayal cut deeper than Peterson's lawsuits ever could. For 3 days, I stayed home, ignoring calls, surviving on tea and dry toast, trying to process the fact that my own son had tried to sell me out. Finally, Sarah appeared with groceries, and Elena followed her into the kitchen like a storm. "Mija," Elena scolded, opening my refrigerator, "you look like death. When was the last time you ate real food?" I'm not hungry, I muttered, but she was already chopping vegetables with the authority of a woman who had raised 7 children. Sarah set up her laptop on my kitchen table. The platform's bleeding, Margaret. Peterson's paying signing bonuses. We're down to 8 instructors and 30 students. If this continues, Grandma's kitchen could be gone in a month. Before I could respond, the doorbell rang. Through the window, I saw David's car. I wanted to tell Sarah to turn him away, but I noticed he was alone. No Brittany. Let him in, I said quietly. But stay close. David looked nothing like the polished consultant he'd always been. His shirt was wrinkled, his jaw unshaven, his eyes hollow with dark circles. He dropped heavily into a chair and buried his face in his hands. They fired me this morning, he said, voice raw. Peterson. They said I wasn't useful anymore since you refused their offer. Elena kept stirring her soup, but I knew she was listening. They hired me 6 weeks ago, David confessed, his voice breaking. Right after the Forbes article. They said they needed someone who understood your model, someone with inside access. They offered me double my usual consulting fee. Pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. So you were spying on me, I said flatly. I thought I was protecting you, he protested, tears welling. They told me small businesses like yours always fail against corporations. They promised a partnership, money, security. I thought it was practical. I crossed my arms. Practical? The hard parts of running my company are the very things you tried to sell off. The instructors. The students. The soul of it. David's voice cracked. I see that now. They never planned to honor a partnership. They only wanted your data, your contracts, everything you built. Once they had it, they were going to shut you down completely. Sarah stopped typing. Elena stopped stirring. Clock ticked loud in the silence that followed. I'm sorry, Mom, David whispered, tears streaming down his face. I thought I was being smart. I didn't realize I was destroying the most important thing you'd ever created. I stood slowly, my joints aching after days of stillness. David, you're my son. I'll always love you. But right now, you need to leave this house and figure out how to live with what you've done. His shoulders sagged. Is there any way to fix it? I looked at Sarah. At Elena. The broken man who used to be my little boy. Maybe, I said. But not today. After he left, Elena placed a steaming bowl of soup in front of me. Eat, she ordered. We've got work ahead. And for the first time in days, I felt hungry again. The idea came to me at 3 a.m. I couldn't sleep. David's confession still echoed in my head, Peterson's threats hanging over everything. But then clarity struck like lightning. Peterson had made one critical mistake. They thought they could steal wisdom the way you copy a file. By 7 a.m., I was on the phone with Sarah. How fast can you set up a video call with every instructor who left? Margaret, they signed contracts with Peterson. They can't come back without legal trouble. They don't need to come back, I said firmly. They just need to listen. At noon, my laptop screen filled with familiar faces, Mrs. Patterson, Elena, Mr. Anderson, and a dozen others. Some looked guilty, others defensive, but all were curious enough to show up. I'm not asking you to break your contracts, I began. I'm here to tell you what Peterson really thinks of us. One by one, I read them excerpts from Maria's investigation, the internal emails mocking us as geriatrics, the ones plotting to eliminate the grandmother problem, the ones calling instructors expendable assets. Mrs. Patterson's face darkened. They told me I was a valued educator. You are, I said firmly. But not to them. To them, you're just content to be harvested and repackaged. Elena leaned forward. So what do you want us to do? Nothing illegal, I replied. But there's something Peterson doesn't understand. They can copy your techniques, film your lessons, even mimic your recipes. But what they can't copy is the wisdom behind them. The stories. The decades of experience. That's what makes you teachers, not performers. Mr. Anderson chuckled. So we give Peterson exactly what they paid for. Just the surface, nothing more. Exactly, I said, smiling for the first time in days. Let them discover the difference between following a script and true teaching. Over the next week, my plan unfolded beautifully. Peterson's classes looked polished, but they were lifeless. Students complained that the recipes didn't turn out, that the demonstrations felt mechanical, that something vital was missing. Meanwhile, I quietly contacted the students who had stayed loyal to Grandma's kitchen. What if I told you your favorite instructors were now offering private in-home workshops? I asked. No platform. Just real learning, old-fashioned style. The response was overwhelming. Mrs. Patterson hosted quilting circles in her living room. Elena's kitchen filled with small groups hungry for her authentic cooking. Mr. Anderson had a waiting list for woodworking in his garage. Peterson had stolen our platform, but in doing so, they'd forced us to rediscover something even stronger. Not just a business. Community. Then, one Friday morning, the call I had been expecting came. Ms. Thompson, said a clipped voice on the line. This is Robert Peterson. We need to talk. I smiled, remembering the little boy I once taught in 3rd grade who tried to copy homework and threw tantrums when it backfired. Mr. Peterson, I replied sweetly. You can book an appointment through my website just like everyone else. But this time, I already knew exactly what I'd say when he showed up. The meeting with Robert Peterson took place right in my living room. I wanted him to sit in the very space he had tried to crush, to see the walls lined with family photos and the herb garden visible through the window, the roots of everything he underestimated. He didn't come alone. 2 lawyers trailed behind him, briefcases stuffed with papers. They clearly expected to intimidate a tired old widow into submission. Instead, they found me pouring coffee and serving warm cookies, not just to them but to Maria Rodriguez from Forbes, who sat at my table with her recorder in plain sight. Ms. Thompson, Peterson began, already flustered by Maria's presence, there seems to have been a misunderstanding about our business practices. Oh no, I replied pleasantly, offering him a cookie. There's no misunderstanding at all. You tried to steal my model, poach my instructors, and bury my platform under legal harassment. The only mistake was yours, thinking grandmothers don't fight back. For the next hour, I watched a 50-year-old CEO squirm as I laid out the lessons any schoolteacher could have told him. You can't steal wisdom. You can't fake community. And you sure can't outlast a grandmother who's found her purpose. Your platform is collapsing, I said matter-of-factly. Students are leaving in droves because they can tell the difference between authenticity and corporate mimicry. Meanwhile, our instructors are busier than ever with private workshops you'll never control. Peterson shifted in his chair. What do you want? I want Wisdom Exchange shut down, I said, my voice steady. And a public apology for your predatory practices. In return, I won't pursue corporate espionage charges, though Maria has more than enough evidence. His lawyers whispered furiously. Finally, Peterson gave a stiff nod. 3 weeks later, Forbes ran the follow-up story. The headline: The Grandmother Who Beat Corporate America. The photos showed me in my kitchen, surrounded by Elena Mrs. Patterson, Mr. Anderson, and 15 other seniors, no longer just instructors but family. That same morning, my phone rang again. David. Mom, he said hesitantly, I saw the article. Are you taking new students for forgiveness lessons? I laughed despite myself. That's a premium course, David. It requires a lot of prerequisites. I'm willing to do the work, he said softly. Brittany, as it turned out, was not. She filed for divorce the very next week. 6 months after Peterson's collapse, Grandma's kitchen had grown into something far beyond what I had ever dared to imagine. We'd partnered with senior centers across the country. 3 universities had adopted our model into their continuing education programs. Pilot episode of a television show was set to premiere, and my first cookbook was already at the printers. But the real success wasn't in the numbers or the media attention. It was in the community we had built. Yesterday, I received a letter that reminded me exactly why I had started this journey. It was from Emma, the little girl who had unknowingly launched it all with her TikTok video. She was 10 now and had begun teaching her friends how to bake cookies using the techniques she learned in my kitchen. In careful cursive, she wrote, "Dear Grandma Margaret, thank you for showing me that knowledge is the best inheritance you can give someone." I sat at my kitchen table, holding her letter, realizing that Peterson Industries had never understood what we were really doing. They thought they were competing for market share. But what we were protecting was legacy. The embarrassing old woman with the poor face had disappeared. In her place stood an entrepreneur, a teacher, and a grandmother who finally remembered her own worth. Not quiet, not suitable, not convenient. Exactly who I was always meant to be, just with firmer boundaries and a business plan. Sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't getting even. It's getting ahead. And at 68, I was only just beginning.